Hey guys, it's Rob Flux here from Property Developer Network, coming to you for yet another Sunday session. This week's session, we're going to be talking about creatively financing your deals. You've heard about me rabbit on a whole bunch of times about no money down deals, but this time we're actually going to work out how do we actually capture the vendor's needs so that we can actually potentially propose an alternative finance strategy to them, or alternative acquisition model to them. And if we can do it right, then we can potentially avoid the banks. Okay, so that's what we're going to cover today. Pretty big topic, pretty big, lots of interest in doing that. Now, before we actually go into the topic itself, we've got to kind of backtrack a little bit and understand exactly what it is that we're doing. And so with that regards, we need to know exactly what's our starting position. So we need to have done a budget. We need to know exactly where we're sitting. We need to have done assets and liabilities. They're all the sort of things that we're going to have to do anyway if we're going to be going to a bank anyway. So we might as well do that upfront and know exactly where it is that we actually are starting from. When we do that, we're going to work out, well, what it is that we actually need for a typical deal. And then when we know that, we can then go, well, what is the shortfall going to be? So where is it that I'm going to be missing different elements? Now, when we start to think about that, there are actually three different kinds of cash that we're going to need in order to run the deal. Okay, so there's equity, and that is typically the deposit that we use to purchase the property. Okay, this could be actual cash, or it could potentially be equity in another property. There's serviceability, that is the ability to fund the loan in order to pay the balance of the purchase. And then liquidity, also liquid cash, and these are the funds that you're actually going to need to run the deal, okay? So three different elements. Now, if you understand which of those three elements that you're going to be short, then we can say, well, when we start to look at creative acquisition models, how do we do that to actually capture that? Now, here's the bit that most people forget. There's actually three different stages that you're actually going to need this. So there's the acquisition stage. So that is purchasing the property in the first place. Now, in many instances, we will consider trying to do that using typical residential lending, where we can do a 20% deposit, which means an 80% loan to value ratio, much lower interest rates, much easier to do, but we have to convince the bank about the serviceability element. So that becomes really, really challenging in some instances. And also we may not have the deposit. So hence having a look at those elements. Now that's stage one, acquisition. Stage two would be when we actually get through to the construction. So once we get to construction stage, depending upon the size of the deal, we may go away from residential lending, and we may potentially go into commercial lending, specifically in the development space. Now, if we do that, our loan to value ratio is going to change significantly. So typically it's going to be 30 or even 40% of the total development cost, which is the total cost that we're going to expend in the project itself. Okay, so our costs have gone up, and also the equity element that we need for that deposit has gone up massively as well. So that's the second stage. Third stage would be, well, if we're going to refinance any residual stock that we might want to be keeping. So at the end of the project, we're going to sell some down and potentially keep some at the end of that. Now, that residual stock, again, will typically go back to a residential loan, typically with a 20% loan to value ratio. And so you find at different stages of the deal, the amount of equity that we need is going to go up, the amount of liquid cash that we're going to need is going to go up, and the amount of serviceability that we're going to need is going to go up. And so a lot of people, unfortunately, only look at stage one of the process, being acquisition. You really need to look at the entire journey and understand where is it that you're going to get stuck, okay? Now, when you understand where you're going to be short, then what we then start to do is to say, well, where can we find, ways to try and either minimize, avoid, or defer some of those costs in the process to see whether or not we can shuffle the decks in our advantage. Now, before we can do that, we need to actually understand, well, what a typical developer would do if they were paying cash in order to actually fund the deal. Now, most developers, they think very linearly. So I can only do a deal if I've got cash, okay? And if that was the case, then there's going to be a huge amount of money that's going to be, the purchase in the first place. So that's a whole bunch of deposit, that's going to be a whole bunch of serviceability, and there's going to be legals and stamp duty and searches and all that sort of thing. So that's money coming out of your pocket and all disappears. Okay, this is how a typical developer would do it. Then after the purchase, you're going to go through all the development approval stage. You're going to pay for all of your consultants, your town planner, your civil engineer, your architect, any other consultants that you might need that are specialists for the project. Then you're going to lodge your application fees to council, and then you're going to sit back and wait for council to actually come up with an approval. Maybe they'll ask a few more questions. You have to engage a few more consultants, pay some more cash. All of this is cash out of your pocket, okay? This is the liquid cash that you need to run the deal. Okay, then again, you sit back and wait, and eventually, hopefully, fingers crossed, you'll actually get your development approval. Now, once you're here, you think you're home and hosed, but the problem is that now you have to go back and re-engage your consultants again for the building approval or the construction certificate, depending upon where you're based in Australia, okay? Again, you're going to go out to all the consultants, but this time you're going to get engineering level detail drawings. So how deep are the foundations? How thick is the concrete? Should we be using steel beams or should we be using timber beams? What sort of cladding are we going to be using? All those sorts of things go into the building approval process. Finally, eventually, we get all those consultants to get that rubber stamped. We get our building approval or our construction certificate stamped, and we go to do the construction. And again, more money starts coming out of our pocket. We're going to have getting the site prep done. We're going to be digging the foundations. We're going to do, laying the slab, putting the frame up. More and more cash just out of our pocket, out of our pocket, out of our pocket. And the only day that we actually get cash come into our pocket is the day we sell the finished product, okay? So property development is very cash flow intensive. And so all that money has to have left your pocket before it will actually come back. And even then, when it comes back, you still are then going to have to pay agents' commissions. You're going to have to pay legals and stamp duties and GST and a whole bunch of costs like that. So very cash flow intensive. And so when we start to look at all of those different stages, so the purchasing stage, development approval stage, building stage, construction stage, when we start to look at those elements, we go, well, if we could be a little bit creative with our acquisition model, might we be able to either defer or potentially avoid some of the costs in the process, okay? Now, how do we do this? Well, it's not about owning the property, but rather controlling the property. So if we can control the property, it means we've got a whole bunch of opportunities that might be presented to us. So firstly, in some instances, you may be able to defer the cost to a later stage in the process, okay? In other instances, you may be able to avoid the costs altogether, okay? In either case, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to improve our liquid cash flow required to actually run the deal. So how much cash we need in our pocket, okay? We need to create opportunities for others to contribute funds where required. So can we create time where we can get investors into the process to get them involved, okay? We want to add soft equity to the project. So get our development approval and increase the value of the property as much as we can before we go and refinance, okay? So this is what we're trying to do is do that through the process. And if we can get the soft equity, that means we may not need to have some of the, pure cash equity, okay? It also may allow us to find ultimate buyers to take this off our hands if we don't have enough funds to run it all the way through the end. So selling a development approved site, for example, or maybe the ultimate buyer might be buying the finished product all the way to the end if we can defer the costs far enough that we can actually complete the project, okay? And in some instances, we may be able to run the entire project and never actually own the property, okay? Now, all of this sounds really unbelievable, but there's actually lots of ways that you can actually do little or no money down deals. Now, I want to be really clear, okay? It's little or no money, and it's not going to work every single time, and it's not going to work everywhere. And so what we need to do is find the opportunities where we can present this, okay? So let's firstly talk about what some of the ways are. So some of the ways that we can do this, we could actually just find a deal and flick it onto someone and get a deal finding fee. So we don't actually have to own the property at all. Instead, we just find the opportunity, we prove it's developable, prove it's profitable, and flick it onto someone and get a deal finding fee, okay? Second one would be vendor finance. That is the person who owns the property, they might be able to fund us some of the money. That means we don't have to go to the bank for that. So for example, if you're short on your 20% deposit, then you might have plenty of serviceability to get the 80% loan. You might go to the vendor, I can give you 80% today, And the 20%, why don't we do that on, I guess, a deferred payment method, and I'll give you the interest rather than giving that to the bank. Okay, so that's vendor finance. You could do delayed settlement early access, which means that you're not paying today, but you're paying at some point in the future. Now, if you pay at some point in the future, then you may, depending upon how much time you've got, you may get to the point where you've actually completed and finished running the project, and you can sell the finished product before you actually owned the original product. That's if you can delay it far enough, and if they'll give you access early enough. You could use other people's money. Okay, there's joint ventures, private loans, a couple of different ways of doing those sorts of things where you can have other people fund the deal for you, where you've got the skills, you've got the knowledge, you've got the time, you run it, they fund it, and you partner up with them. Now, sometimes that can even be the vendor that actually owns the property in the first place. You could project manage the deal. Sometimes we find an opportunity, we go in there and the vendor says, hey, that's great, it looks really good, but I think I'm going to do this myself. We might be able to flip that on its head and go, well, you might be able to do it yourself, but do you know how? Maybe you could pay me to run the project. Okay, so that's one way to do it. And then you could do options contracts where you might be able to control the project for long enough while you add that soft equity. And then with that soft equity, either flick a DA approved site or refinance that with the soft equity and take it through to construction all the way to the end. So they're the 6 different ways you can do with little or no money. The key is your lack of resources should not stop you from being resourceful. Now, all of those are great things to try. The problem that I see is that many of us go in and we have assessed what we need. We assess our current situation, we assess what the deal needs, and we go, well, the only way we can get it to work is like this. And so what we try and do is we try and force that down the vendor's throat. Okay, and we go, well, that's the only way we can do it. So we're gonna push that down their throat. So it's like having a toolkit where the only tool you have is a hammer. So if you only have a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail and you start kind of punching that all over and over and over. Instead, we want to stop making it about us. And instead, what we want to do is try and make it about the vendor. Okay. And if we can make it about the vendor and find out a little bit more about their needs, and that's what this whole topic is about today, if we can find out a little bit more about their needs, we might be able to present what we want in a way that actually sounds appealing to them. And in many instances, sounds like it's their idea in the first place. Okay. Now, if it's their idea, of course, they're going to want to do it. But if we're trying to jam something down their throat that they've never heard of before, then they're obviously going to be very resistant. Okay. Especially in markets where things are very hot, things are moving very fast. And, you know, they're looking for, you know, agents are telling them, look, you can just go get unconditional contracts all the time. So unless you can actually sit down, understand their needs, actually have a genuine conversation, unravel what they are looking for, unless you can do that, then you won't be able to maximize the opportunity to your advantage. So we need to understand what are their drivers, okay? Now, their drivers are why they're actually wanting to sell the property in the first place. Now, I want to be clear here. There are 2 different kinds of drivers. There are needs and there are wants, okay? Now, a need is the bare minimum that they need in order to enact the transaction, okay? So they would have calculated that if they can get a certain amount of cash in a certain amount of timeline, it's going to fund or resolve some problems they've actually got in the background, okay? That's their needs, okay? What their wants is what they're hoping for, okay? And typically, this is what they are telling you up front. So you get to hear their wants, which are ridiculously high in many instances, right? And so quite often we hear their wants and go, whoa, they're crazy. Instead, what we want to do is actually see if we can work out what their needs are. Because if we can meet their needs, then often their wants will start to come out of the picture. That won't be as important, okay? Now, it doesn't sound like it up front, but once somebody's gone, yeah, I can actually get on with my life and actually do what I need to do, at this point, things become much, much simpler, okay? So when we start to do this, most of us do this at a very, very superficial layer, okay? So we kind of ask a single question, we get a single answer, and we go, yep, we know exactly what's going on, and we make all these assumptions, okay? But just like an iceberg, what you're asking up front is typically just the top. What you really need is what's hidden underneath, okay? So unless you're unless you're aware of these hidden drivers, you're going to probably fail in your negotiation tactics. So the key is to take a long conversation, get to know them, take your time, discover a little bit about them, care about their wants, care about their needs, okay? More particularly, care about their needs in particular, okay? Now, there are some constants that can apply in every single instance. So no matter what you do, every single time, there's always going to be these things that people are typically going to need, okay? They want to be perceived as being competent. So you need to show some respect in the conversation and not come across as if you know more than them, okay? So if they come to you with a bit of information that they think is relevant to why their price might be high, you need to I guess, give an appropriate counter argument in a way that doesn't make them sound incompetent, but rather some information that, you know, they probably would have known. I'm sure you know this anyway, but maybe you've kind of forgotten about this element, okay? They also want to be heard. It's very important that you make sure that you're expressing the fact that you are listening to them. You're actively taking the time to hear what they've got to say and care about what that is, okay? They want to be free to choose the outcome. So if you ram something down their throat, they're not going to want to do that. Instead, you want to try and make it so that it is their decision as to how they've come there. Now, I'm going to talk to how we can influence it to look like their decision and feel like their decision, okay? They want to also be dealt with honorably, so treat them with respect in all instances, and they care about their relationships, so they want to make sure that you're always looking after their themselves and both your relationship with them and also their family, etc. Okay, so always those things are going to be constant in every single one. Okay, but when we start to, as I said, the tip of the iceberg is what we tend to ask, you know, why are you selling is typically the question that we get. And we don't spend enough time to get to know them, okay? So we start to hear some key things, which is, you know, things like, well, I need speed of transaction because I've already bought somewhere else, okay? I need certainty because, you know, I've got all this stress in my life and I just want this over and done with. I want the least amount of hassle because, you know, I've already got a whole bunch of stress in my life. I don't need those sorts of things. Some people want flexible timelines because I haven't yet found the next place to go to. And some people want maximum price. And quite often we hear that maximum price in their wants, okay? But when you actually get to know their needs, the maximum price isn't as important as certainty for it, perhaps, or flexibility or something along those lines. And so we need to kind of start to rank those potential drivers. And more importantly, once we get to know what that tip of the iceberg is, we need to understand why those things are important to them, okay? So why do they want those things? Why do they want speed of the transaction, okay? Now, how do we do that? Well, we've got to actually start to listen to them, okay? So we've got 2 ears, 1 mouth. So we should listen twice as much as we actually talk. And when we start to do that, we're going to do what is called the 5 whys, okay? Now, the 5 whys is a concept, okay? And the concept being, if you can ask why, and you've probably had your 5-year-old child ask you all this all the time, you say, please don't do that, little Johnny, and little Johnny goes, why? And then you give little Johnny an answer and he goes, why? Why? Well, we're going to do the same, except we're not going to do it as whiny, okay? We're going to do that with a little bit more conviction and a little bit more finesse, okay? So the first thing we need to do is we need to start by asking an open-ended question or a leading question that allows them the free spirit to actually, or free will, I should say, to open up and give us an answer that could be almost anywhere. So rather than giving them a question where you're going to get a yes/no answer. So leading questions might be, can you tell me why you're buying or why you're selling? Okay, so that's an open-ended question. And hopefully that will start to resolve something. Another open-ended question would be, why would I choose to buy from you right now? Okay, is there any other reason why you would not be selling today? You know, how can I make this clearer for you? You want to make these open-ended questions. Now, when you ask an open-ended question, sit back and listen for their response. It's very important that you're listening, okay? And when you're listening, make sure that you're engaging with them, that you're, I guess, nodding up and down, and you repeat and acknowledge what it is that they've actually said. Acknowledge what they've said, okay? But when they've said it, then we do the second why, okay? So what we want to do now is go, so why is that important to you? Or how will that help you? What's the next step for you from here? So another open-ended question. So for every answer they give us, we're going to ask another open-ended question. And when they give us an answer to that, we're going to rinse and repeat and ask another open-ended question. So we need to be listening really hard to go, well, what is the right kind of open-ended question to ask based on what they've given us? Now, the concept being 5 whys means that if we ask why 5 times and we get deeper and deeper and deeper into the problem every single time, eventually we're going to get to the point where we actually genuinely know the true reason why that tip of the iceberg answer that we touched on before, you know, is it speed, is it certainty, all those sorts of things, why that's actually important to them, okay? So then once we've got that, then what we want to start to do is we want to start to capture those things, okay? So we're going to start to capture, as we hear those I guess those needs and those wants and that sort of thing, what we're going to start to do is we're going to be listening for both objections and opportunities, okay? Now, when we listen for objections and opportunities, there are 3 things to be listening for: fears, pains, and desires. So what is their fear? You know, their fear is the market's going to move too quick. They're not going to get into the next property quick enough. So therefore they want their speed, okay? Or pain, right? Maybe they've got some capital gains tax implications that are going to come and they're really worried about the implications of that. Or their desire, you know, they really want to either downsize or upsize or move into something. So you're listening for all those things. And when we start to listen, we want to write them down and put a little checkbox beside them, okay? Again, we're going to repeat their answer, acknowledge them, nod and acknowledge them. And then once they've done that, so ask them a loaded question, okay? So if we were able to resolve that problem for you today, would you be in a position to move forward? Now, this sounds like a really simple question, and it is. If I can solve the problem that you just raised, would you be in a position to move forward? Now, almost invariably, they're going to say yes. Now, the thing is that we want to keep capturing those things. We want to keep asking that question back. So we're going to listen, we're going to write down, we're going to have a checkbox, and we're going to repeat back. So when we say, would you be in a position to move forward enough times, they're going to give you an answer yes. The next time they're going to give you an answer yes. Next time they give you an answer yes, because if you can solve the problem that they've raised, of course they want to move forward. And if they say yes enough times, it becomes very, very hard for them to actually then say no. Okay, so now given that, it effectively starts to look like their reason for actually going down the path that you're going to choose. So what you can then do is to say, look, what you've said to me, and I've captured all these issues and challenges for you, and you've said you've got this particular issue and you've got that particular issue and that sort of thing. Now, I think I've got a way where I can solve all of those, but it means coming up with a little bit of a creative solution that would be a little bit more non-typical. Would you be open to me proposing something that might not be what you're used to? And then you've got the opportunity to offer your alternative solution, okay? Now, you've led them down the path where they're willing to actually listen. If I can solve that, would you be interested? If I can solve that, would you be interested? If I can solve that, would you be interested? And at that part, now you can start to present things like your vendor finance and your delayed settlement early access and joint venture with the landowner and all those sorts of things, options, contracts, that sort of thing. Now you can actually start to present the one that solves the specific problem that they have got and also aligns with the issues and challenges that you've got, okay? So that's the basic concepts, folks. It's really take the time to listen. Don't ram your solution down their throat. As you're listening to their needs, keep asking them questions about their responses. Write down the responses, repeat those back to them to show that you've been listening, and say, if I can solve that for you today, would you be in a position to move forward? At that point, you can then present your solution. So there you go, folks. That's how you start to position yourself for these really creative low or no money down type deals. So That said, now just going to give you a little bit of a what are we up to around the network at the moment? So as you know, we run these Sunday sessions almost every Sunday, and we've got such a big back catalogue of those. We've started to push those over to YouTube. So if you want to go and start to look at the back catalogue of those, you can jump over there. We've also got, I guess, some Facebook groups, our Property Developer Network, and our development site Deal Hub. We also run our monthly networking groups. Okay, so in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, we also run those. So if you're interested in any of those, make sure you come to our Facebook groups and have a look, or search for Property Developer Network, and you'll be able to do that. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to race over to Facebook, and I'm going to see what questions you guys have got and see if I can actually answer them. So, whoops, let's see how many questions we've got out there. So lots of people saying hi. So hello, everybody. Vivi says, what else can you offer a money partner when they refuse to accept a caveat and a personal guarantee from the director and shareholder? So Vivi, what you've got there is you're pushing a solution into the thing, whereas what we don't know at the moment is what's the problem that's trying to solve. Okay. Now you're also talking about a money partner in that particular instance. So what I'm trying to do is capture the needs of the vendor actually trying to sell you the property in the first place. Okay. Now that said, what can you offer a money partner if they refuse to accept a caveat? Well, personal guarantee, higher interest rate, something along those lines. Now, remembering that they are taking risk by investing in you, so the amount of risk needs to represent the amount of reward. So if you can't offer the level of security they need, you may have to ratchet up your rates. If you can, and they're not happy with that still, you may just have to find yourself another investor. That's probably the simple way for actually doing that. Cara says, thank you, you're welcome. Andy says, hey Rob, great approach. If you were negotiating with multiple vendors on a deal, whoops, that's just gone scrolling past. See if I can find it again. If you were negotiating with multiple vendors on a deal, i.e. neighbors, this is, sorry, it's scrolling really fast. Would you negotiate as a group or independently with each party? Interesting solution, Andy. I don't think both approaches are both right and wrong. I don't think there is one answer that is correct here. My preference would be to negotiate individually, but to be very, very clear that the solution that you're offering is absolutely 100% identical at the baseline. Now, it's important that you understand what the baseline is. The baseline would be, if I offered you cash today, this is what I'd be willing to pay, right? Now, that baseline is probably going to be something along the lines of $1 per square meter type approach, so that vendor A and vendor B, you could offer the exact same $1 per square meter approach. Now, based on that baseline, then you can start to say, well, one vendor is going to give me a certain amount of flexible terms, so that allows me to amplify how much I can give. So you might be able to give an interest rate, for example, if they're giving you vendor finance, or you may be able to avoid holding costs for one party, and so you can pass those back. But it's based on the same, I guess, baseline, and you need to set that scene to say, look, here is what I'm actually valuing the property at. Now, if one is, say, 800 square meters and the other one's 1,000 square meters, that $1 per square meter rate would obviously mean that the person getting 1,000 square meters is going to get a little bit more cash because they've got a larger block of land. So that's equally important, okay? Now, that way, if you set that baseline, it doesn't matter if they come together and start to compare notes, because you've set that baseline scene right away, okay? And then if they choose to come together, then it becomes really, really simple, okay? Because you've been open and transparent with everybody the same way, and I make it very, very clear that I won't change that rate, that baseline rate for anyone. So hoping that helps. Okay, next question from Keaton. Hey Rob, tips for getting to speak to the vendor directly when a property is listed through an agent. Mate, that is a fantastic question, Keaton. So whenever an agent is involved, you need to understand that you are no longer in a two-way negotiation. Instead, you're actually in a three-way negotiation. You are negotiating with the agent as well as the vendor. Now, the agent themselves have both needs and wants. So you need to understand what the needs and wants of an agent are. Now, remembering an agent will only get paid if they get the sale across the line. And so anything that you do with some of these creative finance strategies or creative acquisition strategies that we're proposing might put in jeopardy that agent's commission. And so the agent is not going to want to represent you well through to the vendor. So you need to find a way to understand the agent's need and then solve the agent's need. Okay, now the agent want obviously is as much commission as he can and as much certainty as he can, but his need is really important. Now, an example, two different agents might have two different needs. Agent number one might be fresh out of, I guess, getting their license. They haven't got many runs on the board. They haven't got any commission checks coming through. So they might need cash today because it's really important, because otherwise they can't put food on the table. Right. So in that instance, to get them to be happy, what you may have to do is make sure that you release some of the deposit early that goes towards them to give them that level of certainty. All right. Even if you have a delayed settlement, for example, or an option contract, you want to make sure that they actually get paid up front. That way, once you've overcome that particular objection, then at that point, they tend to be happy to let you through to the vendor. Now, an alternative agent might have a very different need. So their need might be, well, I've been in this game for 10 plus years. I've got commission checks coming through all the time. It's not like that's really a big deal for me, but what I really want is more commission, okay? Now, for this particular person, they might be happy with a delayed gratification type approach. So you may be able to say, well, because I'm providing a little bit more cash to the vendor, that's a little bit more commission in your pocket, okay? Now, quite often, because it's only a really low percentage, that little bit extra in their pocket might not be enough incentive. So you might have to give them another incentive, which is, well, I'm creating all this stock at the end. Would you be interested in selling some of that as well? So now there's not just a little bit more commission right now, but there's also the commission at the tail end, which means that delayed gratification for them means multiple sales out of the one transaction. They tend to get really happy there. So when you understand that vendor's need, if you can solve that vendor's need, then generally that will actually no longer be the handbrake that's stopping you get through to the vendor. Okay, so really important. Good question, Keaton. David says, I missed the first 30 minutes. Are you recording this session at all? Yes, David, it is recorded on Facebook Live. You can actually go back and watch from the start again and see them on Facebook. And we also archive them over to YouTube. Generally takes 2 or 3 days for us to get them over to YouTube. So go over to the YouTube, search for Property Developer Network, and you will see that, I'm going to say, from Wednesday onwards, mate. Or go back to Facebook once this is live, once this live is finished, and you should be able to watch that again. Hope that helps. And that appears to be all the questions. You guys are really quiet today, so great to hear from you. Great, as always, to be here. I'm going to come to you again next week for another Sunday session. And until then, bye for now, folks. Okay, see ya.